so I'm pretty excited to have our fourth Kaleidoscope be with Maggie Farrar from England. Yeah. You have come with both a website and looking at sharing with people. He's mentioned 30 newsletters.
Yeah.
Where you just share people's stories and so on. They're all still available.
They're all available
on your website, which we'll promote. But that's resulted in this kind of handbook, Leading with Presence. I love your subtitle. It's an inside job. That's pretty good, Maggie. I want to just start. I'm going to start with just being pretty grateful that you and Nigel decided to come visit us. And we're sitting in front of a fireplace.
Yeah.
And I remember years ago when you came to Australia, we both were working there. There was that interest in not being a recipe, our discussion with people, that it emerged as the conversation went on, but with this fireside chat. And it's just been one of the best parts of my life as I've been looking at promoting relationships and this series we're now doing, since media is the way we have to go, to have this time with you to kind of look at our work as relational leaders, where we've been finding a way to share what we love and know with others, especially in education. That's still, I'm finding, is a key interest of mine, because school leaders and teachers are always in somewhat of a dilemma, and that seems to have grown even with COVID.
Well, George, first, it's just lovely to be here in New Mexico. How lovely to be invited here into your home and into your fireside. And I remember those. I remember those fireside chats in Australia, and how they help to cultivate a new way of being in community and being in discussion. As you say, as people arrived, they would come with their books, their notebooks, their pens ready to make notes. And it was always so lovely, wasn't it, to see that 5-10 minutes or so, you just see them. First they would put them down, and then they would just sort of ease back into the unfolding conversation.
I remember now some of those on those Better Togethers and so on. The compulsion to write it all down went away. That was one of our best and you're always noticing that. I mean, that's part of what I know is in what's emerged. I love that part you mentioned about people would always ask, well, when do we get to the agenda? But relationships don't feed the task. They're the context in which the tasks get done. And you're talking really clearly about how you can be in that relationship.
Because it's when we used to do the Better Together, George, and we'd start with lots of relational encounters, and people used to sort of sidle up and say, when are we going to start the work?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good one, dude.
Yes, absolutely.
I think for many years, as you know, George, I've been involved in school improvement. I was at the National College for School Leadership in England, training school principals for many years, and I always had a sense at that point that so much of the leadership development work and the work of school improvement was outwardly referenced.
I was very touched by the fact you said at a part that you were no longer formally contracting to help fix schools and principals, and I mean in a positive way. You weren't trying to hinder it, but say more about where you've gone and out of this wonderful career and in so many positions, and where you're finding your best sense to serve the relational approach to people, so that they're living from their best selves,
Yeah.
you might say.
Yeah. That's a lovely way of putting it, George. I hope I can do that. Much of the way in which school improvement was envisaged was very outwardly focused.
Yeah.
So it was very cognitive. It was very logical. And it was focused on, how to run a school, how to improve a school, how to build a team, cognitively referenced. So underpinning that, I always felt, was a real modality, which was a driven, striving, doing mode.
Oh, that's,
And, I would see school...
You're still expressing the exhaustion for others. Yeah.
The exhaustion. Exhausted by that, and living under a constant feeling of I'm not good enough. I'll never be able to do what this school requires of me. A lot of self-doubt.
Yeah.
And so I over the years realised, I think, two things. One, the relational dimension of leadership was so important. Because we cannot engage in this work alone. Michael Fullan says isolation is the enemy of improvement.
Yeah, that's such a wonderful sense.
It's the enemy of well-being. It's the enemy of our sense of self. It's the enemy of so much. So that the relational and then for both you and I, George, that then led into working with schools in networks and clusters and putting the relational first, particularly when the family and the community were also part of that network. And we might talk about that a bit more. And then, so the relational was important, but then for me the other was, I can only be in relationship if I have a authentic relationship with myself first.
Yes, there is an order.
There is there's a reciprocity in how those two things work. So for a number of years now, my work has been looking at the inner world and the inner life of leadership, and how the outer world and the inner world intersect and interconnect. And for me, it's that bridge between the two, where our effectiveness and our wholeheartedness and indeed our sort of authenticity and sincerity around leadership is built. So that's my work at the moment.
It reminds me, even before COVID, in some of our conversations, because we've built that kind of affiliation and relationship ourselves. And I remember, because you can't know in advance what that bridging, your discovery process. One thing we are promoting now in more focus is that if you enter into things relationally, you enter a discovery process, internally and externally. And you can't have one without the other. Yet I remember discovering with you and hearing your discoveries, maybe the last 6 years since I think you were directing at one point the whole national leadership program for England. Quite a challenge. And I remember you mentioning that, well, where is that bridge though? How do you say any more about quickly some of those discoveries when you'd be with people, they had this intention, they knew the internal and the external and who they were, but there wasn't, the bridge wasn't emerging. What helped you see that you could feed that bridge building, but not in ways you'd seen before?
Yeah, it's really interesting, George, just the language. How do we feed that bridge building? So already the language we have is not sufficient for what it is we're trying to cultivate. Because building implies I start here and it gets to here and hey, it looks like a bridge. So I've done it, I've built the bridge, when it's just not. So it's really hard.
No, it's really hard.
So for me, I think one of the ways in which I've always tried to, in my own life, first of all, which is not easy, really not easy, to try to, and in this conversation as well, I'm trying to keep 50-50 attention. 50% attention on what's going on,
Yeah.
the conversation,
Yeah.
what I'm feeling from, what I'm hearing from you,
Yeah.
and what's going on in my mind,
Mm.
and 50% attention on the inner world, not only my mind, but what's going on in my body. Where am I feeling this? Why did I just suddenly feel tight or sit forward?
Yeah.
So what's going on? What's going on? So all the time asking that question about what am I encountering outwardly, what am I encountering inwardly? And then if I can, to always keep asking the question, what else might be true? What else might be true in terms of what I'm hearing and what I'm feeling from George, because that's only ever partial.
Yes.
Ever.
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing you as I expect to see you.
We see what's behind our eyes. It's the old
I'm seeing you as, I see the world not as it is, but as I am, and that's my limited perspective. So breaking free of that, and then in terms of my internal self, what else might be true? What else might be true? What am I not noticing that it might be worth just spending another micro moment waiting?
How has that, I would say, because I have such a feeling for that, mine over the years, I say has come a bit naturally. We had the center and 65,000 people for years.
Yeah.
And I went in with great intentions, but I learned most everything in those times when things didn't work, or I didn't know what to do, or I just kept trying to pay attention, and I didn't always know what I needed to pay attention to. It kind of emerged, this other part you're talking about. And so it was a willingness to care and have a direction and want something, but a bigger willingness to not pretend I had to know. It's that power of not knowing. We wrote on stuff and shared in somewhere or other the power of not knowing. The kind of thing that happens with, what do you do? Let's say a mom and the baby, you have a child, both husband, and you could read a recipe book, but what emerges and what do you do when there's crying all night long? It's a huge discovery process, and you've kind of given, I think, a sequence for thinking about it. 50%, how am I responding? 50%, what's the topic? Can I respond cognitively and others? And then there's this other. How did that come into your awareness about this other, and what does that represent? Does it tie it all together for you?
Well, I'd like to know a little bit more about what you just said there, George.
Yeah.
Because I think if I was before, and I will answer that question.
Yeah, no, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because if I was a school principal listening to what you just said, I would think that that's exactly where I feel my leadership would be most authentic, when I can sit with not knowing for longer than feels comfortable.
Yeah.
And I can be curious, and I can ask questions in order to deeply understand what's going on in a whole range of dimensions before I can even begin to respond.
Yeah.
But as a principal, I feel imprisoned in somebody once said to me, on my door, I just feel I've got a head of answers.
Yeah, of course.
And therefore, that's what's expected of me, and I find it really difficult to cultivate this other sense, which I really do want to.
Yeah.
But how do I do that in a way that involves all my staff, so they can see there's a great cultivation of energy and empowerment and so on with everybody? It's a really hard move to make when you're in a hierarchical institution.
It's the move.
It is the move. So take me back to a moment when you said, when I don't know what to do. Yes. This is sort of where I go next. Take me back to that moment and what happens.
Oh, good. This is exactly what I would hope. Love all of you who might be listening, but we'll be on this for a couple more
We'll be here
hours
for
here. Because this is what happens. I think that sense which hit me early is it, and I think you're now working on that and helping people move to that space, because you can't move there just cognitively.
Exactly.
I remember when you were consulting in Australia and they had these new guidelines and the 5 things principals do, and one of them was respond to and listen to community and help those bridges be built. I mean, great aspirational sense, but you can't manage that because everyone felt like they had to know what to do. And so what I found happened for me is that seemed to be my disposition. I just always felt more comfortable in the end not having to pretend I knew. So it's kind of like how I find people get to that is almost through some of Margaret Wheatley's advice and others, being playful, non-judgmental. The things you're mentioning, and we want to mention that you're helping people see there are ways you relate to yourself and therefore others that allows you to be connected and learning and relational without having to pretend you know in advance. One of my favorites, as you know, I always used to use is people would say, well, how can I manage this? I have to control it. I'm with kids. They're not responding. Our friend and coach Bob mentions that. Why aren't people doing what we're mentioning? I like them. I try to say it pleasantly, you know, all of the good intentions. And we just, I could always help people move to this not knowing stage by saying, you don't have to give up control. You just have to give up the illusion you ever had any.
You gave me that advice one day, George.
Remember that on one, and it kind of stays with people. So it's this sense, I think, when you can enter into what you're calling leadership presence, you change your relationship to all yourself and to others in a way that allows real learning. Or in the model we're trying to promote, real partnership co-creation to occur. That's right. And that's what we're seeing, and I think you're giving the let's say the toolkit, the practices, the ways to consciously do that, which we didn't have before, and I've always done them mostly intuitively.
Yes.
But I know if you stay with people long enough, they finally know that's the risk you have to take.
And you're right, George. A lot of these traits or understandings we have about how we are in the world and how we relate to each other and the way we're all interdependent. We've always known it. But somehow an organisational context, and when we get into a position of leadership, we begin to question who we are in relation to that role, and that sort of knowing the answers, being in control, not showing vulnerability. Well, all Brené Brown's work has been so powerful on that. Somehow we lose that other sense of ourselves, which is the core of our leadership. We lose it. So you're right that there are a range of practices that that are simple. But like all practices, the more we do them, the more they become habits. Practice. Habits.
They become ways of being and doing,
and then modelling, and then it becomes into our DNA. And then we do it, as you were saying. It's almost just how you are. I can't remember the word you used. It just is your natural state of being.
It's your natural way from how you learn and how you operate. I think that part we found is, and I feel sad for all of us because as myself and school leader, we all care deeply.
Deeply.
But the sense, and I think COVID helped emphasize that, is we give up ourselves in the process.
That's the issue.
And we can't even find that
We can't
anymore.
find it anymore.
And I think what you're suggesting is a
Yeah.
way to not blame,
Yeah.
but to reclaim.
To reclaim. Absolutely.
Because
I love
the-
that phrase.
That
Yeah.
Without you
Yeah.
and who you are
Yeah.
coming into
Yeah.
it, what do you really have to offer as a
I
leader?
agree. I agree.
And that's what breaks, because the isolation is separating us from ourselves, from life,
Exactly.
and we're no longer able to
Exactly.
navigate or
Exactly.
move
So
in the
in these
world.
contexts that are deeply relational,
Yes.
that's why we sometimes flounder.
Yeah.
And so when we flounder, we reach for our plans and the way we've done things before. It just doesn't work in a world like today, which is complex and uncertain and
Yeah.
interdependent. So just picking up, George, one of the things you said about we deeply care.
Mm.
We absolutely deeply care.
Mm.
So one of the ways that I've helped to guide principals, because it is hard for principals to move from, I've built myself up as this individual, so it's quite, to open this door requires huge courage.
Oh,
It
you were
requires
mentioning.
huge courage.
Yeah.
So finding a way
It does.
to open that door which connects with what I truly love about this work is the way the door will open, because that's such an invitation.
Yeah.
And it's an invitation for their staff as well. So one of the things that I often start with is working with leaders through a range of, thought processes. So you can use poetry and art, and any way you wish, to reconnect with your core intention.
Yeah.
What is my core intention? My deepest sense of what connects my belonging with my calling, with my purpose. And then to move into a conversation about, so if this is my core intention every single day of my life,
Yes.
where do I now place my attention?
Uh-huh.
So I'm placing my attention, my 50-50 attention, on what really, really matters. And when I'm placing my attention, and that's about being able to stay with not knowing, rather than move away or jump to a response because it's painful not knowing, being able to stay with that and with the feeling it brings up for longer than you feel comfortable with, keeping your attention there, not allowing it to be pulled,
Yes.
distracted by something else. And then the third part of this process is, and when I'm placing my attention, what is my attitude?
Ah.
Curiosity, kindness, compassion, non-judgmental.
Mm.
So that's where I tend to begin with, what's my intention? Where am I placing my attention? And when I place my attention, what's my attitude? And within that,
That's lovely.
I would say there are so many elements. When I see leaders work through this, what comes through is so many elements of what makes great leadership.
Yeah.
It's not, it's not the strategy you've written. This is what makes great leadership. And I often quote to them a phrase. It's in a book. I can't quite remember the title now, but if I do, I will name it. Where she says, it's a book called Relational Mindfulness, which I think I've meant Deborah Eden Tull.
Yeah.
Relational
I have that,
Mindfulness.
yeah.
She says our attention,
Mm-hmm.
as leaders especially, is our greatest resource.
Mhm.
Where we place our attention and how we place it.
Mm.
And we live our lives in a state of partial attention. We live most of our lives in a state of inattention.
Inattention.
Superficial, distracted, rushing, busy. And she says attention is an act of profound love
Yes.
for self and others.
Yeah.
And when I opened this quote with head teachers, our attention is a profound act of love. You could say attentiveness, you can use whatever word.
No, it's
Sense
perfect.
of being attentive
It's-
is a profound act of love to ourselves and others, which is 50-50 attention.
Mm-hmm.
And the head teachers then said to me, the principals, they said, well, so Maggie, inattention, when I'm having one conversation but thinking about another,
Yeah.
inattention
Yeah.
is a profound act of neglect.
Yeah.
of self and others.
Yes.
They said, I don't want to be a neglectful leader. So to me, that's what it comes down to. It's as simple as sort of hard
It's pretty.
as that.
No, that's there you go, because that attention you're talking about. One of the things we've been sharing with people kind of requires your resources for that are then both an open heart and an open mind.